In this video, we uncover the brutal truth of distraction and overconfidence, where one wrong step near wild waters or cliffs can unleash predators that show no mercy. From a Nile crocodile dragging a tourist from a riverbank to a saltwater crocodile harvesting victims from an overturned boat in Indonesia, the first story erupts as a Nile crocodile launches from the riverbank. June 18th, midday. The Kafue National Park, Zambia. The air hung thick, a humid shroud pressing down on the scorched earth. A thin haze blurred the distant tree line, a product of dust and unseen moisture. The Kafue River, usually a vibrant artery, flowed sluggishly, its surface a dull, sun-baked obsidian. Gail Matson, 58 years old, from a quiet suburb in Minnesota, adjusted the brim of her wide-brimmed hat, her gaze sweeping over the tranquil scene. Gail, a retired schoolteacher, carried a reputation for meticulous planning, almost to a fault, yet here under the unforgiving African sun, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in her demeanor had taken hold. Her friends, long accustomed to Gail's cautious nature, noted a newfound, almost reckless fascination with getting up close. She'd pushed for this walking safari, insisting they eschew the safety of the Jeep for the raw, unfiltered experience of the wild. The Nile crocodile, Crocodilus niloticus, the apex predator of these waterways, measured an average of 14 feet, some specimens pushing past 18. Its scales, a mosaic of olive and brown, offered perfect camouflage against the muddy banks and submerged logs. A master of ambush, it could hold its breath for over an hour, its metabolism slowing to a crawl, waiting. Its bite force, an astonishing 2,200 psi, far surpassed that of a great white shark, capable of crushing bone and shearing flesh with terrifying efficiency. The crocodile's signature move, the death roll, a violent rotation of its body, used to dismember prey too large to death roll, swallow whole, was a spectacle of raw, primal power. How could such an ancient, perfectly evolved killing machine coexist with humanity, and what happens when those worlds collide? "Don't get too close to the edge, Gail," Mark, one of her traveling companions, called out, his voice a low rumble. The guide said these banks are tricky. Gail waved a dismissive hand, a slight smile playing on her lips. "Just getting a better view, Mark. Relax. It's magnificent." She edged further, her boot heels digging into the soft earth at the river's lip. The water, a murky, impenetrable brown, offered no hint of what lay beneath. The guide had reiterated the dangers just that morning, pointing to recent claw marks on the bank, a silent warning scrawled in the mud. "Crocodiles here, they're not like the ones in the zoo," he'd said, his voice flat. "They see you as a meal, no more, no less." Gail, though, had brushed it off with a cheerful laugh. Convinced her years of observing wildlife documentaries had somehow inoculated her against actual danger. It was this ingrained overconfidence, a silent conviction that knowledge equated to safety, that blurred the lines between awe and absolute peril. Her actions were deliberate, almost ritualistic. She bent low, scooping a handful of the muddy water, letting it trickle through her fingers, a childish wonder on her face. A subtle ripple, barely a disturbance, spread from the bank, unseen. The surface tension broke, then reformed. Below the placid veneer, a massive, ancient reptile had registered the minute vibrations, the subtle displacement of water. Its brain, a reptilian relic, processed the data. Weight, proximity, vulnerability. From its perspective, the world was a gradient of pressure and shadow. The warm blood pulsed just meters away. The soft underbelly of the bank offered the perfect staging ground. It was an opportunistic predator, and the opportunity was now. Then the world erupted. Not a splash, not a roar, but a silent, explosive displacement of water and mud. A dark mass, a living torpedo, launched from the river, its momentum incredible. Gail saw at first the snout, a ridged battering ram, slick with river grime. Then she saw the teeth, rows of them, a jagged ivory fortress, snapping shut with the force of a hydraulic press. Her breath hitched, a half-gasp, half-scream trapped in her throat. The impact threw her off balance, a sickening jolt that stole the air from her lungs. She felt the searing pressure, a vice clamping around her leg. Not a bite, but a sustained crushing grip, instantly dissolving bone and muscle. Pain, raw and incandescent, lanced through her, blinding her to everything but the agonizing pressure. Her vision blurred, a kaleidoscopic smear of green and brown. A sickening lurch, and she was in the water, dragged under, the sun instantly replaced by cold, suffocating darkness. "No, please," she choked out, the words dissolving into a rush of bubbles. The water closed over her head, heavy and indifferent. The river's surface, moments later, returned to its glassy calm, betraying nothing of the violence it had just witnessed. A single wide-brimmed hat bobbed gently, caught in a slow eddy, before drifting further downstream. Mark and the others stood frozen on the bank, their faces ashen, eyes wide with a horror that transcended words. The guide, reacting with grim efficiency, immediately called for help, his voice clipped and strained. Forensic specialists, arriving hours later, found fragments of clothing and significant blood traces on the immediate bank, along with distinct drag marks leading into the water. Analysis of the marks, consistent with the size and scale of a large Nile crocodile, indicated the immediate disarticulation of a limb, a common tactic for a predator of this magnitude. What was left of Gail Matson was never fully recovered. Expert analysis confirmed the predator's attack method: a swift, powerful strike, a locked bite, and the immediate deployment of the death roll, designed to tear the prey apart. It's a clean kill, brutal in its effectiveness. Nature isn't a gentle postcard. It's a delicate, brutal balance, and we, with all our technology and perceived dominion, are still just flesh and bone in its grand design. The wilderness demands respect, not merely admiration. It demands vigilance, an understanding that its beauty often masks a primal, indifferent danger. A moment's lapse, a misplaced step, a silent assumption of safety. These are the fatal errors. When faced with that kind of raw power, you don't fight, you don't reason. You understand your place. You see the murky water for what it is, a veil. You heed the warnings not as suggestions, but as lifelines. The lessons here are carved not in stone, but in the swift, unforgiving current of the Khufu Gale's story. A tragedy born of a singular misjudgment is a permanent warning that the wild, for all its majesty, holds no quarter for human hubris. The second story strikes when a mountain lion ambushes distracted bloggers at a cliff's edge, sending them plunging into the abyss. October 24th, 2018. Yosemite National Park, California. The location is Taft Point, an exposed granite precipice 7,500 feet above the valley floor. The time is 5:47 p.m., golden hour. The light is thick, viscous, casting long distorted shadows from the gnarled Jeffrey pines. The air is thin and cold, humidity below 15%. A light westerly wind, less than 5 miles per hour, whispers across the rock, the only sound in a world that has gone unnervingly quiet. The usual chatter of Stellar's jays and chipmunks has ceased. There is only the wind. His name is Vishnu, age 30. Her name is Minaki, 29. They are software engineers by trade, but their identity is curated online. They are travel bloggers, their lives a meticulously framed narrative of wanderlust under the handle holidays and happily ever afters. Their critical trait is not recklessness, but a profound and dangerous absorption, an obsession with capturing the perfect moment that renders the actual moment invisible. Earlier, another tourist, packing up his gear, had gestured with his chin towards the darkening woods behind the trail. "You guys staying for the sunset? Just be smart. It's prime time for the big cats to start moving." Vishnu had nodded, distracted, adjusting the settings on his DSLR. "Thanks, man. We'll be quick." Manaki was already scouting the edge, her back to the forest, seeing the world not as it was, but as it would appear on a 10-inch screen. The mission was the shot, the two of them arms outstretched, seemingly floating at the edge of the world, bathed in the last rays of Sunday. A perfect illusion of freedom for their followers. The antagonist is Puma Concolor, the mountain lion, an apex predator of near-perfect design. A large male can be 8 feet from nose to tail tip and weigh over 160 pounds. Its entire biology is engineered for stealth and ambush. The paws are oversized and furred, silencing its footfalls. Its coat is a study in camouflage, the color of dry grass and sun-bleached rock. Its primary sensory input is vision. The large eyes possess a high concentration of rod cells, granting it superior sight in the low-light conditions of dusk and dawn. This is its operational window. The killing method is a masterclass in biomechanical efficiency. A cougar does not engage in prolonged battles. It stalks. It closes the distance with an explosive burst of speed up to 50 miles per hour, and it strikes a precise, lethal blow. The target is the base of the skull or the upper cervical vertebrae. The bite, delivered by canines designed to puncture and sever, is not about exsanguination. It is a neurological event. The goal is to sever the spinal cord, causing instantaneous paralysis and death. A forensic pathologist would call it a high spinal transection. The cougar calls it a successful hunt. They found the perfect spot. A narrow, fissured ledge of granite jutting out over a 3,000-foot drop. Vishnu set up the tripod, meticulously positioning it to capture both the abyss and the fire of the setting Sunday. "Okay, Miki, ready?" he called, his voice thin in the vast emptiness. "Go stand there. No, a little closer to the edge. Yeah, like that." Manaki, laughing, crept backward, her heels inches from nothing. She raised her arms, tilting her head back. Vishnu set the camera's 10-second timer and jogged to join her, his eyes on the blinking red light. Not the world around him. He never saw the warning. The flicker of movement in the periphery, the displaced pebble, the sudden, absolute stillness that precedes violence. From the predator's perspective, the scene was a simple tactical problem. Two figures, outlined against the sky. They were loud, then quiet. They were distracted, their attention fixed on a small black box. Their backs were turned. They were behaving not like dominant primates, but like deer at a salt lick, oblivious, vulnerable. The cougar had been watching for 15 minutes from a jumble of boulders 30 yards away, its body low, muscles coiled. It was not a decision made of malice. It was an equation of energy expenditure versus potential reward. And these two creatures, silhouetted at the edge of the void, were the easiest meal it had seen in weeks. The attack was a silent, fluid event. A launch. Vishnu, wrapping his arm around Minaki for the photo, felt a sudden, violent impact from the side. It wasn't a push. It was a transfer of mass and velocity. 150 pounds of predator moving at 30 miles per hour. The target was Minaki. The cougar's body struck her high on the back and shoulder, its momentum carrying it forward. The jaws, in the same instant, locked onto the base of her skull. There was no scream. Just a wet, percussive crunch as the canine teeth found the junction between the skull and the spine. The blinking red light on the camera captured the first millisecond. Minaki's body going rigid, then limp, a marionette with its strings cut. Vishnu, tangled with her, off balance, had one fleeting moment of comprehension. Yellow eyes, the smell of dust and dry meat. Then the world tilted. The combined weight of the three bodies, Minaki, Vishnu, and the cat, toppled over the edge. The cougar, a master of its own physics, twisted in midair, releasing its prey and digging its claws into the granite cliff face, arresting its fall just a few feet down. Vishnu and Minaki did not stop. They fell. Together. A silent, 7-second descent. The first clue for the park rangers was the tripod, standing alone against the sunset. Then, through binoculars, they spotted the two bodies on a rocky ledge 800 feet below, The initial report was a tragic accident, a selfie gone wrong, but the recovery team noticed anomalies. The position of Minaki's body was unnatural, her head at an impossible angle. The coroner's report was definitive. Vishnu's injuries were catastrophic and entirely consistent with a high-velocity fall. Minaki's were not. She had identical fall-related trauma, but she also had 4 deep puncture wounds at the base of her skull and significant comminution of the C1 and C2 vertebrae. The damage was not from impact. It was from compression. It was a bite. A wildlife forensics team later rappelled down the cliff face from Taft Point. They found what they were looking for. Deep, parallel gouges in the granite, 10 feet below the edge. And caught in a crevice, a few strands of tawny feline hair. The camera's memory card told the final, horrifying frame of the story. Here's the thing about the wild. It demands your full attention. You can't be in 2 places at once. You can't be standing on the edge of a cliff in Yosemite while your mind is performing for an audience on the internet. That's the permanent warning here. They died because they were trying to frame a reality instead of participating in it. They made themselves blind. When you enter an environment with an apex predator, you have to change your own behavior. You must be loud, you must be aware, you must move with purpose. A mountain lion is an ambush hunter that preys on the distracted. And by turning their backs by focusing on a screen, Vishnu and Minaki made themselves the perfect target. The lesson, the one that hurts, is that the moment you stop paying attention to the real world, you risk being violently and permanently removed from it. Nature doesn't care about your story. It doesn't care how many followers you have. It only cares about the rules of survival. And the first rule is simple. Pay attention. Always. The third and final story unfolds as a capsized boat leaves dozens thrashing in panic and a saltwater crocodile moves methodically through the chaos, taking them one by one. May 15th, 2021. Kadung Ombo Reservoir, Central Java, Indonesia. The time is just past 3 p.m. The sun is a hammer, pushing the temperature to 95 degrees Fahrenheit with near total humidity. The air is thick, wet, and heavy. The water of the reservoir is a placid, opaque sheet of brown, its surface disturbed only by the chugging of a single overloaded tourist boat. Visibility beneath the surface is 0. The sound is a mix of the boat's straining 2-stroke engine and the loud, carefree laughter of its 20 passengers. Let's have a quick break. Here's a question for some bright minds thirst for more knowledge. What weapon do people most often use to defend themselves in the forest? Comment below and subscribe so that you will be alert if there is another megamind like you. He is Banyu. 24 years old, the self-appointed leader of this holiday excursion, a man whose reality is measured in likes and shares. His entire focus is on a smartphone, mounted to a selfie stick. His face, a mask of performative joy. Their group's critical misjudgment is a collective one. A shared delusion of digital immortality, the belief that if a moment is not captured and broadcast, it does not truly exist. Earlier, at the small, dilapidated dock, the boat's operator, a man whose skin was the color and texture of the teak he stood on, had gestured with a lit cigarette. Too many people. The boat is for 15, maybe. Banyu had laughed, flashing a wad of rupiah. We're a family, we stick together. It's fine. The old man had shrugged, pocketing the cash, but added one final warning, his voice low. Stay in the center. The boat is old. Do not play around near the north shore. The water is deep there, and things sleep at the bottom. The antagonist is Crocodilus porosus, the saltwater crocodile. The largest living reptile on the planet, a creature that has remained functionally unchanged for millions of years. A large male can exceed 20 feet in length and weigh over 2,000 pounds. It is a biological fortress, armored with osteoderms that can deflect small caliber bullets. While its name suggests a marine habitat, it is equally at home in the freshwater rivers and reservoirs of Southeast Asia, a ghost that travels inland. Its primary hunting tools are patience and explosive power. It can hold its breath for over an hour, lying motionless in the murky depths. Its senses are finely tuned to its environment. Dermal pressure receptors dot its jaws, allowing it to detect the faintest vibrations in the water, the panicked footsteps of a deer, the thrashing of a fish, or the struggling limbs of a drowning human. The kill is a two-part mechanical process. First, the bite. The jaws, powered by massive adductor muscles, clamp shut with a force of over 3,700 pounds per square inch, the highest recorded bite force of any living animal. The 66 interlocking teeth do not shear, they puncture and hold. Second, the death roll. With the prey locked in its jaws, the crocodile spins its body on its longitudinal axis, a maneuver of pure, unrestrained torque. This rotation does not tear flesh, it dismembers, generating enough shearing force to snap bones and detach limbs. It is a system perfected long before the rise of mammals. The decision was born from vanity. Banyu spotted the backdrop, a distant, mist-shrouded volcano perfectly framed by the afternoon light. "Everyone, this is it! The shot!" he yelled over the engine. "We need everyone in it! Come to this side now!" The boat operator shouted something from the stern, a word lost in the wind in excitement. What followed was a slow-motion disaster of simple physics. 20 people, a combined weight of nearly 3,000 pounds, shifted their mass to the port side of a small, unstable vessel. The boat, already sitting dangerously low in the water, listed. A gentle tilt at first, then a severe lurch. The critical angle of stability was breached. From the Predator's perspective, the world was a dull brown stillness. A low, rhythmic vibration from the surface, the boat's engine had been a constant for the last hour. Annoying, but ignorable. Then, a sudden, chaotic change. The rhythmic vibration became a frantic thrashing. The water pressure shifted violently. 20 large, soft-bodied objects had just fallen from the sky, hitting the surface like a drumbeat. It was an auditory and sensory signal of profound significance. A sudden, massive, and unexpected feeding opportunity. The ancient brain, wired for stimulus and response, registered one imperative: hunt. The water was a shock of warmth and sudden silence. For a moment, Banyu was disoriented, submerged in the brown murk. He surfaced, gasping, into a scene of pure chaos. People were screaming, flailing, trying to grab onto the slick, overturned hull of the boat. The air was filled with cries for help. Banyu saw a friend, a girl named Sari, struggling just a few feet away, her eyes wide with terror. He started to swim toward her. He was halfway there when she stopped screaming. She did not go limp or sink slowly. She was simply gone. Pulled down. A violent swirl on the surface was the only evidence she had ever been there. A moment later, another man, to Banyu's right, let out a choked, guttural cry as he was wrenched backward, his body disappearing beneath the brown water with the force of an industrial winch. There was no struggle, no fight, just a sudden mechanical erasure. Panic erupted into primal terror. The enemy was unseen, unheard, and it was everywhere. The attack was not a frenzy. It was a methodical, efficient harvest from below. 13 survivors were pulled from the water by local fishermen an hour later. 7 were missing. The initial investigation report listed the cause of the accident as capsizing due to gross overloading and passenger negligence. The 7 missing were presumed drowned. But when the bodies, or what was left of them, were recovered over the next 3 days, the narrative changed. 6 of the victims were indeed consistent with drowning. The 7th, Sari, was different. Her body was found snagged in the roots of a mangrove tree 2 miles downriver. Her lower torso and legs were missing. The edges of the wound, according to the pathologist's report, were not clean or jagged. They were crushed, displaying massive avulsion, where tissue had been peeled away from the bone. Furthermore, the recovered portion of the victim's spine was fractured in a distinct, spiraling pattern. Marine biologists confirmed it was the unmistakable signature of a crocodilian death roll. The force required to create such a fracture is immense. a twisting, torque-based trauma that no other animal and no boat propeller could possibly inflict. Here is the hurtful lesson. We live with the illusion of safety in numbers, the comforting belief that a group is a shield. But in the water, a group is not a shield. It is a beacon. To an ambushed predator lying in wait, 20 screaming, splashing people are not a formidable opponent. They're a chaotic, irresistible concentration of prey. Your collective noise, your shared panic, is the very thing that draws the hunter in. The real tragedy wasn't just that the boat flipped. It's that their desperate struggle for survival was the exact signal the predator was waiting for. The warning you are given by the man who knows the water is not folklore. It is a survival guide written in blood. When you enter an environment that is not your own, you are a guest, and you are not at the top of the food chain. The surface of the water conceals a world with its own brutal rules, and the final permanent truth is this: the thing you don't see is always more dangerous than the thing you do. I'd love to see where everyone is representing. Find your country's flag emoji and drop it in the comments. Let's see how many different flags we can get. Bye for now.